present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Do you want the whole truth?
I don't think you're ready.
Governments don't control things. A government can't control the economy without controlling people.
It's Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth.
Welcome back. Yes, from the last show. Come on now. You've been just watching the MC Hammer video, haven't you? Yes. I've got the overbite going. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. What are you talking about, man? I'll tell you what I'm talking about. Go to the Facebook page and check out the prayer for those to come to Christ that we do every Thursday with pastor, author, and friend, Pastor Aaron Free. We also do something on Thursdays on occasion. I will say this every other Thursday. And we speak with this man. He's the president of Boyer Research, and he is also a Forbes contributor, Jerry Boyer. How are you?
I'm fine, Crane. How are you?
Good. I wanted to make sure, because I was going back at my notes, chairman or president of Boyer Research, because I messed that up on occasion, and I want to get it right.
President of Boyer Research.
Score. All right. Now we're on. So, all right. That's one of the books. Now, Jerry, we've referenced this before, and we've talked about it, I think, pretty much since you wrote the piece in 2010 or 2011 about a Dickens of a debate between Mr. Scrooge and Mr. Say, and you take on A Christmas Carol and the representation of Ebenezer Scrooge. Yeah. I thought we'd welcome everybody into this with a statement that President Obama made Wednesday in regard to inequality and fixing it in the government's role. Here is the president. Roll it.
Third, we need to set aside the belief that government cannot do anything about reducing inequality. It's true that government cannot prevent all the downsides of the technological change and global competition that are out there right now. And some of those forces are also some of the things that are helping us grow. And it's also true that some programs in the past, like welfare before it was reformed, were sometimes poorly designed, created disincentives to work. But we've also seen how government action time and again can make an enormous difference in increasing opportunity and bolstering ladders into the middle class. Investments in education, laws establishing collective bargaining and a minimum wage. These all contributed to rising standards of living for massive numbers of Americans.
And to be against those would be Scrooge-like, would it not?
Well, yeah. If you interpret, the sort of the modern interpretations of Scrooge, I should say if you accept the modern interpretations of Scrooge, but of course those interpretations aren't really what Dickens intended, and the commentary that Charles Dickens was making about the economy has been almost completely reversed by the people who now use A Christmas Carol and the character of Ebenezer Scrooge as a bludgeon against, say, for example, free market economics.
And it goes beyond that, in fact, because you address the content of what Dickens wrote and what the ghosts from Christmas Past were addressing and where they took Ebenezer Scrooge. It's absolutely fascinating because we've talked about this before, and it's just a different door to walk through, this being the door of A Christmas Carol.
Right.
But we're talking about something we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about the fact that the state is not against the individual. It's a choice between the state and God.
That's right.
And you can expound
upon that.
Who's
the final provider,
yes.
The state or God? That's the real debate.
Right. And when we hit that particular question, we can pretty much look, if we take that lens and look at any of the political debates we're having domestically, so to speak, and many of them, and certainly in the case of economics, we can see it right then and there. That's the question, is it not?
Yeah, it is. And what people have to understand is that there was a debate that was raging between two schools of economic thought in Charles Dickens' day. And when Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol, he was clearly coming down on one side of that debate. And the debate was largely between a man named Thomas Malthus, and on the one hand, and on the other hand was John Baptiste Say, who was a disciple of Adam Smith, the free market economist. And Thomas Malthus said that human population grows faster than the supply of food. What he said is human productivity grows arithmetically, but grows geometrically, but productivity only grows arithmetically. So pretty soon, Malthus said, population will outstrip the food supply and will be mass starvation. Because Malthus did not believe in the idea that a free market economy could cause, continuing growth. He didn't think of each new person as a mind to solve problems. He thought of each new person as a mouth, as a consuming mouth. And what Malthus taught is that what you have in an economic system is a surplus population, and that this surplus population is bound to starve, and it's inevitable that it starves. So either you stop the surplus population from being born, or you have mass starvation. And that's the clue as to what's going on with Dickens, because you remember when the Christian men of charity visit the shop of Scrooge and Marley, they're taking a collection for Christmas relief, and Ebenezer Scrooge says, "No, I don't want to give. Send them to the workhouses, which were government-run entities." He's saying, put them on the government dole, because he doesn't really believe in private charity. And the men say, well, some, don't want to go there, and some would rather die than go to the workhouses. And Scrooge says, well, then let them die and decrease the surplus population. And in other words, Ebenezer Scrooge is a Malthusian. He believes in this idea of the surplus population. On the other hand, John Baptiste Say, who debated with Malthus, they actually corresponded. I've read their correspondence. Said that he's basically the first supply-side economist. Say believed in the idea that people can be highly productive. They can get more productive. Division of labor allows people to specialize, and you can have an abundant economy. There can be plenty for everybody. You don't have to worry about mass starvation. What you have to do is allow people to come into the world and welcome them, so certainly educate them, put people to work, have job creation, have economic growth, and human beings are by nature producers, mainly. Say, you're first a producer and then a consumer. So, human beings were producers in Say's view. So Dickens is really weighing in on this, and Dickens is siding against the people who basically, in our time, these are the people behind zero population growth, these are the people behind Planned Parenthood, these are the people behind forced abortions in China or, sort of encouraged abortions here in the United States. They're all based on the same philosophy that Charles Dickens put into the mouth of Ebenezer Scrooge.
And when we look at how government views things, this is the government attempting to say there's a limited amount of pie out there,
yes,
and we're going to divide it for you. And we have
if there's a limited amount of pie, somebody's going to go hungry, right?
Yes.
And that's Malthus. Mm-hmm. And Say and Dickens say there's not a limited amount of pie. There's plenty. And that's why the Ghost of Christmas Present takes Scrooge to the marketplace. That's kind of his first reclamation. So Scrooge can see that, in fact, there's plenty of food, and the food is affordable. When he visits the Cratchit's house, they're eating oranges. Oranges are from the tropics, right?
Yes.
Cratchit is not a wealthy man, and they have oranges for Christmas. And, what Dickens is doing is he's pointing to the benefits of free trade. He goes to great lengths to talk about the Spanish onions and the oranges, from the tropics, and all these things from other places around the world. What's interesting is, I know Scrooge isn't a real character, but if you sort of make him a real character, he would have grown up during the period of time before Britain accepted the free market economic policies of Adam Smith and repealed the tariffs, what were called the Corn Laws. See, Britain had a lot of tariffs on importing food during the time when Scrooge would have been a little boy, and there would have been and food would have been very expensive, and poor people would have had trouble affording it. And what Adam Smith said is, you need to repeal these tariffs, and then food will be cheap, and poor people will be able to eat well, because these tariffs are stopping us from importing food from other places around the world, and they're also stopping us from exporting, say, industrial goods. And that everyone will be richer if we get rid of these tariffs and embrace trade across borders. And then eventually, the corn laws were repealed, and what you had is a steep drop in food prices and abundant food from around the world. So Dickens really kind of understands what's going on in the economic history. He sees that Adam Smith, at least at that time, won the debate, and they turned towards free trade and low taxes, and that's why food was abundant. But Scrooge grew up in a time of more socialism, what they called at the time mercantilism, and that's one of the reasons he had a sense of scarcity. Because under socialism, you really do have a lot of scarcity. Scarcity is not so much deep scarcity. Hunger is not inevitable in the human experience. It's just inevitable in the socialist experience. But in free markets, what you have is decade after decade, less and less hunger and more abundance.
What does God's word say when it comes to the idea of compassion and the compassion of, hey, we want to take care of the planet, we need to take certain steps to take care of the planet, and it's presented that way. There is a leftist movement within the church that certainly embraces parts of these, and it certainly is welcomed, it seems to me, where a society has become, children are looked at as an expense, generally speaking, and I got to tell you, before I truly came to Christ, even as a believer in Jesus and being pro-life, I will say that I sat there, and the first thing I thought of when I thought of children was the average cost was $118,000 to raise a child from zero to
right.
You know,
I've seen that out in the media, right.
Right. And
if
so
all the clothes you buy are new, and
yes,
you
right. But I'm telling you that was, I didn't think I was off in. It was just I wasn't conscious of how awful that thought is. I look back at that and I think, what an odious thought to have and a mindset, because I'm in essence I'm looking at life as a cost. What does God speak to when he talks about children? Because I think this is a huge part of what we're dealing with today. It's almost as if we say children and marriage will limit me instead of grow me.
Yes, that's it. That's right. We think of them as limitations. And in fact, they are limitations, because all growth requires limitations. Right? You can't grow. To use the analogy of growth, you can't grow till you're planted in something. Right? A seed that's just like floating in the air, or just out there on the sidewalk, doesn't grow. It's got to get planted someplace. We grow when we get planted someplace. And what God intends is that we're planted in families. And then the roots can grow, and then you can draw sustenance from that, and then you can grow much bigger than you could otherwise. But you need, what the left calls limitations, I would just call an environment, just a place to live, a place to be, and the natural place for the human spirit, for the human soul, humanly speaking, is in a family. Of course, our natural place for our soul is in God, but we're not just in God, abstractly, like floating souls. God puts us in a world, and he puts us around people. Yes. And they limit us enough so that we can really transcend our other limits. Because the biggest limit you have is selfishness, right? And what families start to do almost immediately is start to break down selfishness, or at least challenge it. Now, if you're selfish, you can turn against that, and you can turn your back on your children. And some people do. But the first thing that children do is they turn you out of yourself. And it's interesting. I know there's data about how much it costs to raise children. Those numbers are absolutely ludicrous. I'm a father of 7. Let me tell you, it's not we haven't spent $800,000 raising them. But there's also data about the difference between single men of a certain age and married men. They earn more, and I think one of the reasons they earn more is because they grow up.
Yes.
That's how we get connected with the future. So being married and having children goes together with being more affluent. Being unmarried or not having children or not being with your children goes together statistically with poverty. People who are not in families are far more statistically likely to be poor than people who are in families. So, that's really the adversary. That's really the liar who whispers in the ear when he says, oh, children will make you poor. No, being alone will make you poor. Children will make you rich. I mean, they'll just make you rich just by being a parent. That's a richness. The Bible talks about children as a form of richness, and I believe that. But in addition, just in economics terms, as an economist, I'll say that having children, tends to correlate statistically rather strongly with higher income levels. And not just for an individual, but for societies. Societies that do not demographically grow economically shrink or stagnate. And we're seeing that now in Europe. We're seeing that now in Japan, that you have to have growth. You have to have actual population growth. You have to have a pro-nativity, nativity referred to as Jesus in the nativity, but nativity actually refers to any birth. You have to have a pro-nativity or a pro-natal culture in order to have sustained economic growth. And the places in the world that tend to grow are the places that bring new workers in the world, the people who reject the ideas of Thomas Malthus, which Charles Dickens rejected.
One other thing I like about your work, Jerry, is the fact, as we go to break, that when I read something that you reference, I go and take the time to look it up and research it to understand it a little more. And so you're opening a door through education that way by referencing these, explaining it briefly, but allowing us to go back into it. And I know this is going to sound hokey, but I got to tell you this because Catherine and I were talking about this on the drive over Thanksgiving. I hope you realize what an important voice you are. I hope that
Thank you.
It really is important. So many people write in and talk about this, and as we go to break, I just hope that you recognize what a blessing you are to us and to the people that you're communicating with. I'd like to post this article, the Dickens of a debate between Mr. Scrooge and Mr. Say, on the Facebook, if that's all right with you, Mr.
Please
Boyer.
do.
And thank
and
you.
You're a blessing to me, too. You're a blessing to me as well, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. And have a Merry Christmas. God bless you, man.
To you. God bless you.
Take care.
God bless
All right.
everyone.
Now, what I'm going to do is come back with, I get to talk to the people I love. This is just awesome. Pastor Aaron Free is next. We're going to talk about Israel. We're going to bring you up to speed. Yes, Kerry Netanyahu meeting. What does it all mean? We'll break it down. We'll also talk about how God can transform you and break your addiction. Praying Durham's Nothing But Truth. Prayer to those to come to Christ. Check out the Facebook page, AFR Talk.